Okay, in this one we're going to be analyzing perhaps the most famous female actress, at least in regards to her looks, is Angelina Jolie. And I've chosen a younger photo of her because, as you can see, there are some stark differences in the older photo. And also this isn't the best angle to use. So we're going to go with this one, and I think this will have better assessments overall. And I'm just going to wing this, so bear with me if I pause. I'm just looking at the sheet at the same time. So these are the photos we've selected, and you can already see that she has an exceptionally prominent jaw. So the first thing we want to note is that her brow ridge is slightly flatter. It's actually ideally flat, so women tend to have about 13 degrees. Their brow ridge will be a little bit flatter than a male face, because if you can tell logically that a male face will have a more protruding brow bone, so their overall brow region will slope backwards more. So her forehead is ideally tilted, and we can see that her brow region is highly feminized, and this is her nasofrontal angle, the angle made between the brow and the nose, and hers is about 140 to 143 degrees, which is feminized but not extreme feminization. So you can still see there's a discernible angle, but it's a lot wider. A male face will have an angle that's a lot more acute as the brow bone comes down and forward. So I don't know if that's ideal quite yet, but it's not a big flaw, I can say that. Her nasolabial angle, or the angle her lips and nose make, is perfectly ideal. It's on the lower end because her upper lip kind of curls upwards. I think it's better in this photo, it's higher quality. You can see that her upper lip curls upwards, which is a desirable trait. It's about 93 degrees, so that is a more masculine angle, as closer to 90 is masculinized. So perhaps that's not the most ideal, but I don't think it's a big flaw either. Another flaw she has potentially is that her face is overly flat. If we take the facial convexity assessment, we can see that her face is almost perfectly flat at 180 degrees. And I can tell you that straight away, that isn't ideal. In this photo it's slightly less, but she's not fully front on in this photo. So this photo is a better representation, and in this it'll be about 179 degrees. So that's almost a completely flat face, as you can see. That takes this point, and this point. And ideally there should be a slight curvature to that instead of a straight line, as the ideal angle will probably be a little bit lower than this. So we'll see that she probably has an underbite, or she could have just had surgery, but we can't say for sure. Either way, it's not the most desirable assessment. And the same thing applies with her total facial convexity, which just takes her nose as well. The same thing applies, it's too high at about 151 degrees. However, her nasal projection is perfectly ideal at the feminine ideal, and this just takes how projected the nose is. It measures this point divided by this line up her nose to this reference line, and hers is the scientific ideal in female face at 0.55. All of her lip assessments are also perfectly ideal. Taken this photo. So this is the E line. She has great lip assessments overall. As you can see, her upper lip lies more behind the line, and the upper lip protrudes more beyond this line than the lower lip. and in the Steiner S line, all of these points align. So she has all ideal lip assessments in the side profile. So if you want to replicate how an ideal mouth area looks in the side, it's kind of like that in a female, well, actually in a male or female face. And another way we can kind of tell she has an underbite of some sort is the nasomental angle. Actually, we'll do the nasofacial angle first. So this is the nasofacial angle, and it's only 26 degrees. And you can see that how acute it is, like how close the angle is. Ideally, it's between 30 to 36. So it should widen out like this slightly. And I'll show you an ideal range. So this would be about 32 degrees. So if her chin was like set back over here, it would be more ideal. However, that would throw off her lip assessment, so it's kind of it's a trade-off. But just to show you that the overall culmination of her features is not the most ideal. And the same thing applies with the nasomental angle. This angle is about 137. And the normal range is 120 to 132. And hers is 35 to 37. 135 to 137. So ideally, again, this lower angle would be closed off over here and be, that's 132 now. So the same thing applies. Her chin has a little bit too much protrusion. Her jaw angle is highly masculinized at a low end of the ideal range. So this is her gonale angle, and it is about 114 degrees, 113 to 114, which is extremely low, but still ideal. Her ramus is long, again at the ideal at 0.63. So she has a very similar jaw morphology to Margot Robbie, perhaps even more masculinized actually than her. And her eyes protrude a bit. As you can see, this is her eye, and her tissue below lies behind it, so that's called the negative orbital vector. And ideally you want some more protrusion here because you want more deep set eyes. Her eyes are not very deep set, so that's one of her flaws as well. We'll look at the front profile now. So I don't think she's going to score that highly on the side at least, but we'll take a look at the front now. And even here she has some flaws, but first we'll look at her neck width, which is quite low compared to her jaw width. It's about 78%, which probably is still ideal in a woman. So that's not a flaw. But her chin is a little bit taller than ideal. Her chin to philtrum ratio is 3.03 to 1, and ideally should be 2 to 2.5. This mostly stems from her full lips, which makes her philtrum short, but her chin itself is not that overpowering. Her face shape is ideal, as her face is only 1.37 times taller than it is wide. So that's ideal. And also her facial width to height ratio is ideal at 1.98. So overall she has ideal face shape metrics, but her cheekbones are also very high set, like all the other women we've analyzed so far, as her cheekbones lie about 84%. So this length is about 84%, which is really high. And similar to the other women, I think this is a really common trend here, is that attractive women tend to have the golden ratio of mouth to nose width. And this isn't a a hard rule. Obviously, there's plenty of attractive women who don't have this, and we'll see that in future videos, but it's definitely a trend. So hers is right at the golden ratio of her mouth to nose width. And yeah, her facial thirds are also exceptionally good. So her lower third is 32.9%, which is really close to 33%. Her middle third is 33.8%, which again is not even 1% away from 1/3. And her upper third is 33.3 or so percent. So she basically has equal facial thirds, which is, these are the ideal facial thirds. Her lower lip is quite full at about 1.2. Her lower lip is full, but her upper lip is also very full, so it's only about a 1.2 ratio, which might be slightly lower than ideal. Her midface is extremely compact with a midface ratio of 1.09, so that might fall outside of the ideal range. And again, it mostly stems from her short philtrum region and her compact midface. Her eye spacing is great though, at 45.8% of facial width. Again, a common thing we've noticed among the first 5 women we analyzed is they all have eye spacing between 45 to 47%. And her eyes are only about 0.89 eyes apart, which is really close to the ideal as well. So overall, 9 out of 10 eye spacing, really good. Her eye tilt is also ideal. So this tilt is 6.3 degrees. So she doesn't have the most upturned eyes, but it's still in the ideal range. It's kind of deceptive. Her eyes look more upturned than they are because the shape is more rounded at the top, but we take it at this point, which is called the lateral canthus, and this point, and then the line between here is the angle. So overall, she has great eyes. Her eyebrow tilt is a little bit extreme at about 19.2 degrees, and it just gives a more alert, feminized eye appearance. I don't think I would consider this a flaw, but we'll see. Her eyebrows are about medium set, so they're not that low to the eyes, but they're also not that high. At least the lowest point is not that high. You can see that the top point is very high. But that does produce a kind of aesthetic eye area appearance. So her eyebrows are medium set at about 0.78. And the last thing is that her jaw is slightly flat. That's the last flaw. So she does have a considerable bunch of flaws, but she also has some really positive features as well, like high cheekbones. So yeah, her jaw is slightly flatter than ideal. It's about 97 to 98 degrees. It's just a slightly flatter jaw than the other women we've analyzed, but I think the non-negotiables for an attractive face is good eye spacing. If you have good eye spacing, high cheekbones, and defined jaw, it's almost a guarantee that you're going to be attractive. And that's all for this one. So if you want to order an analysis, of course that's in the description, and suggest any more female faces you'd like to see in the future.